Great. So very warm welcome, and we've heard some of you talk before anyway, and I think most of you are here this morning, right? So you know who I am. So I'm not going to waste any more time. I'm outside anyway. You can talk to me. But so the one sentence: I run technology at the tech leader network for the Nordics and Baltics. We kind of work together to stimulate tech startups scale up in tech as a whole across the region, and work internationally with our global network through a range of initiatives to really help everybody grow their businesses in the tech space. That's kind of the short story. But you can come and talk to me outside, and Anna's from our board sits at the back, so you can talk to Anna too. So that's me. So without further ado, I think we need to dive into this debate. I think it's quite interesting. Last time we had so much to talk about, we ran out of space, didn't we? So I think what we're going to do is just do a quick intro. Some of you have spoken already, so you can just add a little bit to what you might audience there. So who you are, your organisation, and just make a brief statement for us, please, if you can. Just kind of one-liner that sort of sums up your view on this topic, which is blockchain-based bonds, securities and assets, investing and regulating. So this regulation word comes up all the time, doesn't it? So maybe we can exhaust the subject by the time we go home, because there's a lot to talk about, isn't there? But so if you want to kick off, please, and just give us a quick intro and a statement, and we can get going.
Sure. Be happy to. I'm Martin from Haller Grønbæk. I'm an IT lawyer, tech lawyer. I work from Bird here in Copenhagen. I don't actually have an additional statement, so you can take mine.
Yeah, my name is Nägele. I'm a lawyer from Liechtenstein. I love my work because as an IT lawyer you can combine your fascination about technology and about coding with law, and I love it because it's if law bores me, I try to code a little bit. If coding bores me, I read some laws or write. So, and I think that this tokenization of assets, generally, like this tokenization, is a big opportunity, but will not solve all of our problems. Actually, I think we have a lot more problems to solve than we think. But we'll try to do that.
Excellent.
My name is Jeppe Stokholm. I am head of tax and legal and corporate finance in Amazix. I'm based in Zurich, and Amazix is the world's biggest blockchain advisory company. We have advised more than 120 projects and raised more than 1.3 billion to our clients. And we are right now focusing a lot on giving advice on the tokenization of all kinds of securities, and we see this as a very big part of the fourth industrial revolution from the financial side, and we totally believe that the financial system we see today, there is a lot of room for improvement, and one of the tools to improve the financial system as we know today, that is based on the blockchain and the technology there.
Excellent. Fantastic. Luka?
So I'm Luka, I'm the CEO at BlockTrade, which aims to be a secondary market for security tokens and other tokenized financial instruments. I think that the whole use of distributed ledgers when we're talking about capital markets is barely starting out, and we will definitely see a wider adoption in next couple of years. So I think we will see tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of tokenized securities, while we won't even know that they're actually running on blockchain.
Very interesting. Just coming back to you, Martin, just real quick, sort of your quick sort of statement. Tell us, just to summarise real quickly before we dive into the questions. What's your kind of 2 pennies worth?
Well, on the one hand, I'm very excited, like they would say in this, super excited about the potential of this latest example of decentralizing technology. I think that it will bring, and is bringing, a lot of innovation. Obviously, like every time before where we have seen this new kind of technology that's disrupting the center. There will be a lot of failures, there will be a lot of new ideas, and most of the things that we are talking about today is probably not going to be around, because just like we did before the dot-com bubble burst, nobody had any idea what was going to be the killer app of e-commerce afterwards. And it's the same thing here, that some of the technologies we're discussing today is probably not going to be around. Some of the ideas that have been presented today are going to be hopelessly blown to oblivion in a year or two, but then in 3 years we'll see something entirely new. And I think this is a very, every time this happens it's fantastic to see, because it's always going in the direction of new opportunities. On the other hand, everybody in this room loves decentralization, but we want to be a monopoly. So we're going to figure out, on top of all this decentralization, how can we monopolize this stuff again? It's just like Facebook has done with data, when everybody thought that the internet was going to be the ultimate level playing field for competition. So this is interesting. It's there's always this dance, decentralization, monopolization, and it's it's really interesting to be part of it.
So we're going to dive into what this whole thing is, just in a second. But before we do, I just want to say, I'd like to try and create a bit of an interactive debate here, because there's a lot of people sitting here with really interesting perspectives and experience in this space. So I don't want this to be a round of speeches with a bit of Q&A at the end, right? So I want you to chip in, comment, question, say, hey, I don't agree, or I do agree, or I think this too, and stuff, because I think we can all learn from each other. I think that's real value. So please feel free to kind of say, hey, I want to add something, and after each question, I'll kind of try and open up the discussion a bit as well, so we can all participate. I think that's a good idea. So let's try and dive into what this whole space is, just for now. So a lot of people probably know, but give us, what's your sort of definition of this space now? Sort of block-based chains, asset securities. What is it now? And for what you were just saying now, Martin, how might that change over the next few years? Crystal ball, I know, but seriously, what are we really talking about today, and how do you see that evolving?
Well, as Martin mentioned, it's still early. We have no idea how it's going to look like in 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
We definitely know there will be...
Well, 2 or 3 then, not 5 or 10.
What's important right now, that we cannot even, as people who are working in the industry, we cannot even decide which words to use. So this kind of explains the situation we're in. Basically, we're very early, but that doesn't mean that the opportunity is not there, and the potential is definitely there, given the fact that both on the primary and secondary markets and in the tokenization of real world stuff has also a lot of benefits. I think this is something that we'll be talking a lot more in the future.
Yeah, please.
Well, I have a quite aggressive approach, because I can see all the projects we are advising at the moment, and things are developing extremely fast at the moment when it comes to the projects and the ambitions they have. So the big challenge right now is the regulatory side, that a lot of things can happen on paper, but if you then try to make a European solution, then things are not harmonized in Europe. So of course you can start out in a member state. You can go to Liechtenstein. I mean, Liechtenstein is very crypto friendly, and then you can passport a lot of things around in Europe. You can also go to Switzerland or UK and do stuff there. But basically, right now, the lack of harmonization and the lack of regulatory security, that is a challenge. But that said, if we go back before the .com and we saw all the internet projects there, then it was difficult to choose which project will be the winner. Because when you looked into the economy of them, many of them didn't make any kind of revenue. I mean, but still, then we have Amazon today. Yeah. So they managed to do it. Yeah. So and I am an investor. I'm both a lawyer and an investor. And I am extremely interested in this space, and I'm also investing in this space, because what I totally believe in right now that are the platforms that in fact make this possible and make this happen. So for me, investing in platforms, that is interesting. And then again, you can see that we have heard today about how you can tokenize real estate and do stuff like this. I totally believe that every time we have a token that represents a value, then it's extremely easy to transfer that token to another person. And then immediately we have the disruption of the financial system, and that I believe in.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I will make a couple of points, and one saturating from what you say. I feel that to a certain extent, this enthusiasm and optimism about there's everything wants to be tokenized, and then we're going to see extremely a lot of new things happening. I think actually that we will see to a large extent that this technology in the beginning will be adopted by not disrupted, but incumbents who want to prevent to be disrupted. And this is, I guess, all the money in this room is not coming from startups making money. Maybe somebody made money because they persuaded them to buy initial coin offerings in the beginning, but the rest of the startups are not making any money at all, and they're not getting funded especially. But all the money are coming from the investments by Oracle and the EU and all the established players. It's fintech because it's a financial service who's using technology, and not tech fin because it's the technology firms that are changing it for the incumbents. So I think actually there's going to be a really lot of lowering down or dampening down the innovation in order to protect against disruption by using this technology. On the other hand, I think that actually we are what I think is going to be very interesting is that I think in a couple of years we will see the return of the ICO. Because that was really what was interesting, that there was not a tokenization of a share, but a totally new class of way to get incentivized innovation at a certain level of the staff. And that's going to be very interesting. But it's dead right now, but it will come up because that was really innovative.
So you want to try some more complex?
Yeah, I want to add as well, there's something, because I think we still have a minor number of projects which are aiming for an ICO. They're not public at the moment, but they're waiting for their second turn. And I think it's a very good way for example, protocol developments that totally makes sense. So if you have a utility and you sell that token, then the fundraiser in the way of an ICO makes totally sense. I totally agree. And actually what we saw the last years is that in the beginning we had all of these young tech entrepreneurs coming to us and said, yeah, we want to do that and we want to make it in a compliant way. What do we have to do? So they had a lot of knowledge about tech. They know everything about the software and everything, but they had no idea how to make it legally compliant on the one hand, and on the other hand they had no idea about execution in a business manner. So you see a lot of projects which are well funded because they did it in the early stage, and they have no idea how they execute now. They sit on a really big amount of money. That's the one thing, and I want to give you another thing to think about, because what we now see is that some projects start not to talk about blockchain. So, and I think that's needed. So you don't sell your product because it's blockchain. You don't put your blockchain on your stock company name and it's gaining in value. That's not the idea. But you have companies which say, yeah, we solved this and that problem, and when you look under the hood, you finally, and you ask them, they say, yeah, we use some kind of blockchain technology. That's why when we have clients, and we did, I don't know, 130 clients was end of 18, we asked everybody the same 10 questions. Do I need a blockchain to solve it? I mean, does it make really sense to use blockchain? And in most cases, because we dropped about 80% of the requests during the last years, it doesn't make any sense. And I think if you can solve a problem with that solution, that makes sense.
Let me just take some news. You wanted to add something?
Yeah, no, let's just go because it came a little bit far away from that
So
discussion.
it's kind of interesting, this, because this takes us back a little bit to where we were in the first panel, isn't it? Where we talked about, and the morning speakers were kind of saying, well, hey, this is still experimental. We haven't really got any use cases. Johan said this morning, we should not trying to use blockchain as a solution is an enabler. Let's define the business problem and solve that and see if blockchain is a potential enabling technology. Right? There's a danger, isn't there, that we kind of have a solution in search of a problem. Just because blockchain is hype and there's a lot of excitement there, so we are kind of looking for ways to apply blockchain. That's the one way around though, isn't it? So what do you think? What are the key opportunities here, do you think? And so what I'm interested in is this particular panel is very focused on asset securities specific applications, whereas this morning we were saying actually we haven't actually really defined the applications that are the right ones. So where are we? Where is the opportunity here? What do you think? And everybody as well, please, if you have views, I'd love to hear them. Yeah.
No, but I totally agree in the approach, saying that it's not about blockchain as the savior of everything here. It's all about having a use case and then make it happen. For instance, if you use a mobile pay solution where you transfer funds from one wallet to another wallet, you don't think about what is the underlying technology, but what you think about is does it work, and is it more effective than the other things I have as an alternative. And this is what it's all about. It is taking the financial system as we know it today and think, can we do this a little bit smarter? And if we have a blockchain solution that is smarter, then use it. If it's based on artificial intelligence, let's use it. If it's machine learning, let's use it. But there are so many possibilities here.
And I think that's the right way around, isn't it? We have this problem, there's 100 different ways we can solve it. Maybe blockchain can help with this, but the starting point is the problem, isn't it? But yeah.
I think where the internet was a global information integrator, the blockchain can be a global transaction integrator. So 20 years ago, when we needed information from Spain or South America, we couldn't get it, and suddenly we could. But we still need to make the transactions, and the blockchain can be the transaction integrator. So I think it will have unlimited potential.
Yeah, that's good.
But I think, when you're saying that we should never build a solution in search of a problem, but the other way around, that's stating the obvious. But that's not the way the world works, because we are fascinated by new technologies, and for a long period, the way that actually these things are moving is that something new is coming out. And this has been happening here, and it's totally natural, and I think it's good because it will focus for a period to say we don't care. It's the way that research works. You don't know whether there is actually a problem, but you find new solutions, new theories, and I think it's quite natural. But at a certain point, obviously you have to go the other way around. And I think to some extent we're there, but we're not there yet, because there's a lot of technologically sort of ground level research and development that has to be done where you don't have a clue about whether there's somebody who can actually use it for anything. So I don't think, I think that, and this is actually also where I think some of the ICOs will be still very relevant, because all this level, protocol level, but also very basic research where you don't can actually get anybody to fund it unless you get a grant. There is going to be something coming up with respect to coin offerings that are not related to a share in the company that is doing it or something else.
I smile partly because I spent 10 years in IBM. I don't know if my former IBM colleague is still here, but it's very funny that, because of course IBM went on this whole transformation, from a product to a services provider, and there was quite some time where you would kind of, hey, I'm in charge of selling Z zeros or P zeros, and you go to a client and say, hey, you want to buy that, and the client's saying, that's cool, but what problem are you solving for me? That's the thing, isn't it? So we have to be focused on that, I think. But someone else, was there someone else that wants to,
Yeah, I think just like as with the internet, when it started out in 95, 96, nobody knew that we would have hotels.com.
Yeah.
And they emerge as the industry emerged. So we don't know what we will be seeing, but I'm pretty sure we'll be seeing a lot of
we talked about that this morning as well a little bit, didn't we? And I think Johan was saying that we might be 10 years out before we really know what we're doing in this space. And I guess that's the nature of innovation, isn't it? So you experiment, you collaborate. It's test and learn, isn't it? To an extent, I guess. Okay. Anyone else from the floor want to say anything? Yeah.
Yeah, on that point too, I think Luka's example of post-traders, that is a pretty good example here, in the sense that I think people are really looking to turn a technology into a solution to something where you basically just apply it to all the existing infrastructure that's there, right? You say, hey, we can share a database between the brokers, the clearinghouses, the CSDs, so on, that's great. But that would, in a sense, defeat the purpose, I think, because I think that infrastructure, those actors were built with another technology in mind, right? I think it would make more sense to start over, build something new, rethink it entirely. Of course, that's really hard too, because you don't just pull out the roots of something that spent the last 80 years building right like that. So there's a big question of where's that transformation going to start? Who's willing to sort of push in the right place to do something like that? And that's really hard.
Yeah.
And that's a really great point, because you can definitely start over, and we saw a lot of projects that actually did it. But then you come to a point that when you touch a security or a financial instrument, there's a thing called regulation. So whoever is involved in technology, we really love to start over, because it's a new problem. You can start from scratch and build something that solves the problem even better. But unfortunately, European Commission doesn't work that way.
I have a question about that. Because you're also talking about regulation. A lot of the problem is when you're building inside this space, or you're managing projects that are building inside this space, you come across, you have different regulations, you have regulators that are slow, who don't understand it, so on, so on. Why don't you make your own regulation that's coming from inside this space? Make a set of regulation that projects can say, okay, we got to follow these, whatever. Something, so we regulate ourselves in a in a good manner, in a correct manner, and then also governments can choose to go along with those regulations, maybe change them a little bit, but something so it's coming from the right space, because right now there's we are fighting so many outside regulators who don't understand shit, and who have a lot of other things to think about. But make like a frame set for how the regulation should be, and maybe then projects could acknowledge them, governments, whatever, but there could be some kind of
you're talking about self-regulation, essentially.
I'm
the
talking
industry
about
tries
I'm talking about some exactly.
But I think this is happening, and obviously it is happening all the time, because the fact that you're coding a protocol to a consensus mechanism is trying to regulate the governance of a space where you otherwise would have to use company law or laws about articles of association. So this is happening. I think there's a big mistake. I actually think the regulators and the politicians are pretty savvy about this. They are not ruling anything out, but they're saying, obviously, we're not going to jump into some space before we know what's going to happen. And if we, who are actually, or you, who are the coders, cannot get your shit together and actually do some standards and some templates, then it's totally ridiculous to say that please do this for us regulators, because we should do that ourselves, and I totally agree with that. But still, that regulation is going to be compliant with the other regulation as well. So it's just maybe postponing the problem a little bit, because by the end of the day, we can come up with a sort of small isolated republic on the net or in cyberspace, saying now we've done all our own rules for that, but by the end of the day it has to correspond with the regulation that's in each space.
But that's what I mean, because there's so many problems with, and the other thing is true, of course, governance on the projects, all this shit is also developing some sort of regulation inside the project. But to have the connection to the legal side, to those who are the official regulators now, to make that more easy, that transition, make some good, correct legal classifications, all this kind of shit, that there's so much trouble about, and then people can join.
But that's exactly what they're doing in Liechtenstein.
Yeah, I mean,
and there's the sandbox environments that have been emerging in a number of different areas, right? In order to, I think, encourage exactly that, isn't it? So you can create a kind of level playing field and say, look, this is where you can test and learn, isn't it? So
yeah, but to combine these two thoughts, I mean, if you want to think about the use case where this really makes sense, tokenization, I think the primary market with security token offerings, when we did the first one, that was like when we thought about the steps necessary to do that in the traditional world and now in the new world. Yes, we had a lot of challenges with the first one, but in the end, this is now being standardized more and more, and there are security token alliances, like security token offerings alliances, which will provide a one-stop shop solution. And I'm pretty sure that 30% or 40% of my work will be disrupted within the next years. So this, you will have legal clarity there as much as you can have, because that's a harmonized system in the European Union, and basically it's the same in the whole single market. So I think the legal challenges we will have are some civil laws of transferring tokens and stuff like this, but the basic questions, they are answered. That's the one thing, and you already see like alliances, associations trying to be self-regulated and find like solutions and that's a good thing. Real IT lawyers, they share most of their knowledge. We share all of our templates with all of our colleagues for free.
Okay.
Jeppe wants to say, or somebody at the back wants to say something.
Yeah,
as well. Yeah.
I had a question, like following up on that, I think an interesting question to you now that you know a lot more about legal than at least I do. Have the industry been good enough in educating the regulators throughout the past couple of years? And then given what you are saying that there's a lack of harmonization, at what speed will you see regulation harmonizing first in Europe, first and foremost, but more interestingly, given that we are talking about global protocols by definition, at what speed will that happen, in your view, on a global scale, and who will drive that?
We need to stay the rest of the evening, I think, to answer that question. But
just quickly regarding the regulators, at least the ones that I've spoken to in the past more than a year, they are very well aware of what the technology does and where the risks are. So I think that all of us in the ecosystem did our jobs well, presenting the use cases and presenting the technology. But then again, you still have some people who are not interested, so you cannot enforce the knowledge into their heads.
Again, I think actually it's again and again being mentioned as an excuse for not getting ahead, that the regulation, it's exactly the same thing. I don't know if you remember with e-commerce, there's no legislation on digital signatures. We cannot make any agreements on the internet because there's no that's bullshit. I mean, we could do that. It was, and so it was. It's. I don't think. Let's forget about this and just move on. In Trade-Ship's example, I mean, you're faced with so much disharmony and legislation in the traditional analog transaction that's taking place that it's nirvana what you're moving into here, because it's much more. The regulators are much more coming up to having standardized version for digital trades that they ever had in the analog world before. So I think, I mean, I don't really think that it's a huge problem. And again, I think that really almost there's competition among the different jurisdictions to find the best way of doing this. We never saw that before, maybe in the tax area, but never before. So I think actually it's can I just make one
yeah, quick one, yeah.
I think listening to all the presentations today, we always had this question about why are you using blockchain technology for this by the end of the day. And I think what dawned on me was that what I've been thinking throughout the day is that, yes, you have these two things about blockchain technology. It's decentralized decision making and it's distributed data. And everybody agrees that for at least the business, enterprise, government solution, you cannot have decentralized decision making. You have to have a centralized decision to a certain extent, error correcting, right to be forgotten, and all these kind of things. So is there anything left actually of blockchain technology by the end of the day if this is supposed to work? And in my, I come from open source, and everything good is open in a sense. And in my opinion, blockchain, the real promise of blockchain technology here is that it's, I think it's applied open data management.
Interesting. So we're coming up against time, but and I was actually going to round off with the regulation question, but it seems like we immediately get onto the regulation question in all the debates that we have. If there are, we'll take another couple of points. If there are any other roadblocks, if you like, to adoption and further development that are not about regulation, what is that, or what are they? Just quickly a statement each, and then a couple of points, and then we'll close out. You're not allowed to mention regulation, we've discussed it. What else? Are there any other roadblocks, challenges here?
Yeah, I do think that it's just too complex to use most of the solutions at the moment in a secure manner. Right. The problem is that you have, you get the user, he's responsible for what he is doing. If I lose my private key, I still want to be a shareholder of Apple. But if I have a token which represents the share, I have to be a shareholder. And it's incredibly complicated for really beginners to store private keys in a secure manner. And to transact and to think. I think this has to be just, the user experience is really horrible in most cases. And I have a clear picture. I mean, nobody of us, I mean, there are still people using like this old-fashioned analog photo machines. I mean, everybody of us is using digital cameras. So if we, I think we will get rid of every problem if we have real good solutions, which are more easier to use, and they're very user-friendly and very shiny, and the user interface is nice. I think then we will have adoption, and then this we will see that in a broad.
Quick statements from there.
No, but regarding the whole user adaptation, if we look into the development of the internet, then in the start you had to have a modem, and then you have to call up, and then afterwards you needed to have a very specific address, and you really had to stick very focused on that address, otherwise you would not get anywhere, right? But that was solved very quickly, and the same will come with the blockchain. It will be solved very quickly. But I'm not saying that then it will change everything very quickly. I mean, I still come into offices and they have a telefax, and I think, what the fuck? What they're doing with the telefax? But they still have it, so it will still be there.
Maybe the concept of this fax thing.
It's crazy.
You get asked for a fax number sometimes, and I say to people, "What's that?" It's just like, wow. Luka, a quick one. What's any other roadblocks?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with the user experience and user interface that they need to be improved, but on the enterprise level, there's still a lot of showing that we actually solve problems. So just having the specific problem solver in the product or a solution, and building the sales team. So everybody right now is in the building phase, but not enough projects and
a lot of money are thrown at it, and in a few years investors will start saying, well actually, what's this achieving?
But I must also say, regarding all the use cases, and when people say, but all the banks, they don't want to go to blockchain, and they're very reluctant on everything, and then people start talking about cryptocurrencies as the best example. Right now in Denmark, everyone is talking about money laundering and AML, and I mean, that is so easy to implement on a smart contract and can be handled very easily on a blockchain. And I think that the banks will be forced to use this technology one way or another, because also right now they are drowning in paperwork for compliance and stuff. So this is a revolution. It is going on, and I think it will happen much more quicker when it comes to the adoption.
I think the biggest bottleneck is the technical complexity, because when the internet emerged, everybody who could do a bit of HTML could start out making a website and offer some kind of service, and you had abundance of very young programmers, flocking into it, where the complexity of programming a network, a smart contract, making it work, making an application out of it, is so many times more advanced. Had we had this conference in '99, we would have been 10 times as many. So I think the complexity of the technology is the biggest bottleneck for making applications that are user-friendly, and therefore it won't have the same acceleration as the internet in the number of applications.
You got the final word. We're getting the marching orders. We're going to have to carry on the conversation outside. We have to close that. Martin, Thomas, yeah, but Luka, thank you ever so much, and thank you to you.